Hello everybody, welcome to part 6 of Kerbal Space Program. The journey continues. We are blasting off here from the KSC with the crew transport variant of our Mark II shuttle. Jebediah and Bill are at the controls for this one, and they're joined by a little contingent of other Kerbals, namely Kerdard, Bargel and Johnny. For today's mission, our Kerbals have got a couple of things they need to accomplish. First of all, well, those of you who've watched recent episodes won't be surprised to hear we've still got a couple more things to do to our new, as-yet unnamed interplanetary vehicle before it's ready to go. Secondly, we are taking up a new crew for the space station. That's right, Kerdard, Johnny and Bargel will be the new crew, replacing Gwenby, Donfort and Dottie. It's been a while since we rotated the crew. I think it was in the last series, actually, so I thought I'd pop up there and give the guys that are up there a bit of a break. The ascent goes by without a hitch. It's a very well-behaved vehicle, is my Mark II shuttle. Very much unlike my Mark III shuttle, but we'll be seeing a bit more of that a little bit later. Today we are finishing off our new vehicle, just adding those finishing touches, and then it is done. Well, nearly. We won't be sending out the Eve mission vehicle just yet. We won't be doing that until much closer to the time, but apart from that, yes, it is ready to go. And I expect if you've been watching the last few episodes, then much like me, you're probably sick to death of building this thing. We do have something else towards the end of this episode, by the way, something different, something new. But yeah, it'll be nice next episode to get onto something completely unrelated. Also, this will be the last episode before I start to fast forward a little bit. I don't like to jump too far ahead in one go, so I'll try and keep that to the bare minimum. Find stuff for us to do in the meantime, but yeah, those transfer windows are still a fair way away, so we really need to start picking up the pace a little bit. Anyway, back to this mission, and our Kerbals have managed to safely navigate their way to the Aristotle space station, where our new vehicle is attached. They carefully bring themselves in to dock just on the underside of that little habitation module there, and yeah, now the real fun and games can begin. We start by just topping up the station's monopropellant tanks, and then it's time to begin juggling Kerbals about. So we transfer the new crew across to the station, making sure they're all in the right modules, of course, and whilst we're doing that, we transfer the old crew back across to the shuttle, and somewhere in the process of doing that, I misplace Gwenby. I misclicked on something, and now I can't find Gwenby Kerman. In the end, I do manage to track her down to the emergency return vehicle, from where I can grab her and chuck her into the shuttle, and now we're finally ready to begin the last part of our mission. For this one, Bill Kerman's going to show us his stuff, so we get him out of the shuttle, and from here he's going to transfer those storage containers over from the shuttle's cargo bay to their relevant attachment points on that new vehicle. Now, these just contain an assortment of various spare and emergency parts because, well, you never know what's going to happen when you're millions of miles away from home. Now, we managed to attach the first container without much trouble, but the second container, I'm not sure what happened. I must have misclicked on something or let go of a mouse button too soon, but regardless, the result is that both Bill and the container are sent spinning off into space. From here, obviously, time is of the essence, so Bill manages to regain control and gives chase to our wayward container, and after a bit of fine manoeuvring, manages to get it back in his inventory where it belongs. From here, we get ourselves turned around, we manoeuvre our way back down to the space station, and it's not easy because these containers are full and heavy, but eventually we finally manage to get this troublesome container firmly attached to the side of our new vehicle where it should be. We briefly make a note of how much fuel is missing from the tanks of our new interplanetary craft, and then it's time for Jebediah, Bill, and what I expect are some quite exhausted colleagues to start making their way back home. Yeah, it's been an interesting mission. It's just been one of those. Nothing major has gone wrong, but there's just been lots of those tiny little errors that you'd rather you didn't have, but weren't too much of a problem to overcome. It's just when they sort of gang up on you, they can be a real pain in the backside. But not to worry, we've seen the last of them. Well, sort of. We do have to spend a bit of fuel to get over the mountains and make sure we get back to the KSC. But apart from that, everything goes well, and we get a decent landing back on the runway at the KSC. So with all the components finally in place, it's time for us to start bringing up the fuel, and for this purpose we are launching one of our Mark III shuttles. Valentina is in command for this one, and she is joined by Bill, Bob and Tommel, and Valentina will need to be at the top of her game today because I still haven't managed to iron out those little wobbles you get on this shuttle on the early part of the ascent. Seriously, I think I've tried just about everything by now. The only thing I haven't tried is attaching additional control surfaces to that large booster stage, which I was trying to avoid, but yeah, I think I'm going to have to give that a go at some point. Adding another complicating factor to our journey to orbit is the fact that we are right on the limit of this craft's lifting capability to the station. I mean, holy hell, I cut this one fine. Normally, by the time we ditch that booster stage, we have an apoapsis well outside of the atmosphere, but not this time. In fact, just as I'm trying to push our apoapsis up to my preferred 85-kilometre mark, we run out of our conventional fuel and we're on the monopropellant engines from here on in. Normally on these missions, as you've seen, I like to use the monopropellant engines for when I can get away with doing a long, slow burn, and using those main engines for when I need a real kick of acceleration, but sadly the latter option has been taken away from us. This is all because I wanted to do all the refuelling in just the 2 trips. With hindsight, I could have done it with a slightly smaller fuel tank in this craft and the same in the next mission, and that would have filled it, but well, that's hindsight for you, isn't it? You live and learn. We were fine with the monopropellant engines in the end. We just had to take a little bit of extra care in the manoeuvre, make sure we didn't waste any fuel unnecessarily. Our delta V does drop quite low at one point. We pull up to the space station with a little over 120 meters per second to spare, which isn't enough to get us back to Kerbal in the controlled fashion I'd like, but, well, we'll solve that problem a little later. So we come into dock, we're in the dark. Normally I'd wait until we're in the light to do this, but that would involve the shuttle and the station drifting apart, and I didn't want to waste a centimetre per second of delta V that I didn't have to, so we just try and dock as promptly as possible. So we start the relatively simple process of transferring that fuel across. We managed to fill that first tank all the way, and we have enough fuel to make a start on that second tank as well. Now, getting home. I decide I'm going to use the monopropellant engines again, so I'm going to borrow some monopropellant from the station. I know I'm going to need the best part of 300 meters per second delta V to get home. I also want to make it a nice, round fuel tank amount, just so I know how much I have to take up on the next mission. In the end, I decide to just drain the fuel out of the space tugs. That gives me pretty much exactly what I need, and I just fill those back up from the station's main tank, and then I can fill that back up when the next mission comes up. The journey home goes pretty well. Perversely, for a mission where I've basically been struggling to find energy, we approach the KSC with far too much of it, and we have to pull some manoeuvres to try and bleed as much of that off as possible. And with the unideal approach, we do get something of a bouncy landing, but we're down on the runway nonetheless. So, same craft, same mission objective, slightly lighter cargo this time. Tom Olkerman is in the driving seat for this one, and he is joined by Gwenby, Dottie and Donfort, who are nice and rested now and desperate to get back out on a mission, or at least a short mission that ends up with them back at the KSC. Same as last time, we pick up a bit of a wobble. It's not quite as bad, and it's certainly nothing our skilled astronauts can't handle. In general, pretty much everything in this mission is just that little bit better, runs that little bit smoother than the last mission. I mean, we still have a very heavy cargo. I didn't bother measuring out the monopropellant as exactly as I intended in the end. I just took half of it up in the with the payload, and the other half I knew I'd have enough to take that out of the shuttle's tanks. Generally, though, the ascent goes well. We do manage to get our apoapsis up to its usual height with some of our normal fuel remaining. I mean, not a lot of our normal fuel remaining, but still some of it, which is an improvement on last time. Once again, we do have to lean a bit more heavily than we would usually on those monopropellant engines, but as I've been saying, it's not as much of an issue this time. But it is around this point in the mission where I start thinking to myself, you know, this is a bit ridiculous. We are 4 and a bit years into this save, and here I am, struggling to lift 27 tons of cargo to a space station we have 200,000 meters above Kerbin. Now, hold that thought for me. We'll come back to it a little later. In the meantime, however, our Kerbals are doing a fine job of manoeuvring their way to the space station, and we pull up to the Aristotle with enough delta V left in our tanks to make our way back home, and that's before we've transferred all that fuel across. Plus, we're managing to do it in daylight, which is an added bonus. We carefully bring ourselves into dock with Dotty, Donfort and Gwemby, not quite sure how to feel about seeing this place again after such a short period of time. From here we start the job of transferring that fuel. We comfortably have enough to fill that tank, and with that our new craft is fully fuelled and stocked. With today's primary objective fulfilled, there's just time to refill that monopropellant tank on the space station before our Kerbals say their farewells and head home. Yeah, 3 of them pretty much sick of the sight of the place by now, so I'm sure they'll be especially relieved that we're starting to make moves in the direction of the KSC. As per last time, we ditch our nearly empty payload as we approach the atmosphere, and then it's time for our Kerbals to get prepared for what should hopefully be a nice routine landing back on the runway. After an otherwise error-free mission, things don't turn out that way, however, and I just can't get my glide slope to extend far enough to reach the runway, so we have to land on that little bit of grass just short of it, which is pretty irritating. So with all the big stuff out the way, we've still got a couple more things to attend to. First of all, back at the space station, our science lab is running a little low. It's about 2/3 full, so we could do with topping that up to make sure it's running as efficiently as possible. So we just top it up using the container we installed not that long ago and the experiments we brought with us back from the moon. And with that done, well, do you remember when I asked you to hold that thought about our lifting capabilities not being quite up to standard? This is the reason why. This is the Brunel Mark II, and we are going to take it on a quick test flight. Donfort Kerman is in control for this one, and he is joined by Bill and Bob, who will be assisting him with making sure that this one runs as smoothly as it possibly can. Now, the Mark II is a 3-stage launcher as opposed to the Mark I's 2 stages. The bottom 2 stages use those 3.75 metre parts, which I've had available to me for quite a while now, so yeah, this really is very long overdue. Our payload today is a full 36-ton fuel tank, and based on the results of today's test, it could comfortably lift a little bit more. I don't know exactly how much. I'll leave testing that to a later date, but yeah, this is a much-needed improvement on our general lifting capabilities. It's still based around that same Brunel orbiter, but the purpose of this craft is to get everything up and into a fully circularised orbit before the orbiter has to expend so much as an ounce of its fuel. Because of this, the whole process of docking with the payload is a little bit different. We still detach the orbiter, get it turned round, dock with the payload, pull it away from that final stage, but here things get a little bit different. We get ourselves turned around much as we did with the Mark I, assisted by those RCS thrusters on the adapter on the other end of the payload, and from here we're going to back ourselves up and dock that decoupler block onto that final stage. So we decouple that, and now this final stage, with everything extra it needs in that little service bay, turns itself around, gets itself deorbited, and that is the junk taken care of. Now this is just a quick test flight, of course, so we just fly around to the other side of the planet just so we get the sunrise. We deorbit ourselves, we get rid of that fuel tank, we get rid of our service module, and then we make our way into the atmosphere. Now obviously if I was playing this game career mode, I wouldn't just ditch a full massive fuel tank like that. Or in fact, if I was doing this real life, I wouldn't do that because, you know, apparently the massive fire caused by millions of gallons of rocket fuel falling on top of something isn't environmentally friendly. Damn hippies. And just because this is the internet in the 21st century, I think I have to point out explicitly that was irony. The exact opposite of irony, however, is the fact that this test mission has been a complete success, and as our Kerbals splash down into the ocean, we have another launch vehicle up our sleeves. So that will be all for today, everybody. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Next time we've got a couple of things to be cracking on with, none of which, thankfully, involve building an interplanetary vehicle. So I hope you join me for that. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.